On today's Locked On Giants podcast, why does Matthew Stafford really make sense for the Giants if they can get him? And what might he cost them in a trade? We've got that and more coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find our tons and tons of written work. We've been keeping very busy this week with the combine going on, so do check that out. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, look, I know a lot of you are probably sick of the quarterback talk and whatnot, but it's kind of important, I think, to discuss this Matthew Stafford rumor because it does have legs. And I know a lot of you are like, why Matthew Stafford? Why would the Giants give up anything to get him? He's 37 years old. Why not start from scratch with a rookie? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm going to answer some of those questions for you, or try to answer some of those questions for you on today's show. I'm also going to take a look at what it might cost the Giants if they were to be able to engineer a trade, what I think would be reasonable. And then finally, in segment 3, we call the segment Lucky 7. What is Lucky 7, you ask? Well, Joe Schoen, the general manager of the Giants, mentioned some players that he right now likes at the top of the draft board, which if you listen to yesterday's show, I talked about how I thought the Giants might consider trading down now that they have 7 guys that they like. So I'll take a guess at who those 7 players are, and I'm sure you can take a guess as well. So that should be a nice, fun exercise for us, and we'll do that in segment 3. All right, so let's get started on this Matthew Stafford thing. Now, a lot of you have said to me, why would the Giants do that? Matthew Stafford's 37 years old. He's at the tail end of his career. He's not going to want to come here. The Rams aren't going to want to trade him. Why does this story apparently have legs? Folks, the Giants, from what I'm hearing, are really, really determined to get Stafford if he becomes available. Now, they're going to have competition. Mainly the Raiders are going to be competing for him. Now, let me answer the first question, which is, why would Stafford want to come here? The Giants, and I know you're going to think I'm crazy for saying that, but if you really look at things objectively, you've got Malik Neighbors, you've got Tyrone Tracy, you've got Theo Johnson. That's a nice young core of players, all right, that Matthew Stafford could potentially throw to. The offensive line, once they figure out what they're going to do at right guard, that unit, if healthy, not too bad. All right. I mentioned the defense. If they can fix the defense and the holes that they have on there, which they should be able to do in the draft, they can upgrade this team. So I think a lot of you who are maybe saying, oh, why would Stafford want to come here? The Giants are terrible. I think you're looking at last year, which, is true. The Giants were pretty bad last year. But if they could pull it in together, make some good moves, the Giants maybe can be competitive with Stafford. Now, are they necessarily going to be a Super Bowl team? Absolutely not. They're still, at least a couple years, maybe 3 years away from being a Super Bowl team. But can they be more competitive with Stafford? Yes. And oh, by the way, if you're Stafford and the money is there, which I'll get to in the next segment, actually, if the money is there, then it doesn't matter. You say, look, if the compensation with the Giants on what they're going to give up to get Stafford is on point, you just go. I mean, because for Stafford, it's all about being paid in the top 10. I think if you were to compare the Giants and Raiders rosters, maybe the Giants are a little bit ahead of where the Raiders are, maybe just a little bit, so I don't know, guys. I think this story definitely has legs. I've been saying it It has legs. And here's why it makes sense for the Giants. All right. The plan last year was to trade up to get a rookie quarterback, have that kid sit for a little bit while Daniel Jones and maybe Drew Lock did all the heavy lifting. As we know, the Giants weren't able to trade up. So they had to roll with Daniel Jones. And when he couldn't get it done, they went on this odyssey with Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and Tim Boyle. That, folks, is the plan for this team moving forward. All right. And I keep mentioning and trying to remind you that the Giants did the same plan with Eli Manning back in 2004, where they had a veteran bridge in Kurt Warner. He took the reins for the first, I think it was the first 9 games or something like that until Eli was ready to step in. So there was no rush to push him to the forefront. All right. Same exact situation with the Giants. All right. Regardless if they take a quarterback in this year's draft class. And by the way, I am not convinced that they will do so, at least not in the first round. I am growing more and more certain that that will not be the case. I'm sorry to disappoint those of you who want Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I think, if they get Stafford, that will definitely not be the case. They will go best available, and that best available will probably be a defensive player. Now, here's the thing. If they sign Stafford, if they get him here, they're going to rip up his old contract with the Rams, and they're probably going to sign him to a multi-year contract. Now, I'll talk more about the contract and the structure in the next segment, but it is doable. For those of you who are saying, oh my God, $50 million a year, how are they going to do it? Folks, it's doable. Trust me. I'm working out the final numbers. I'm going to do an article on that on New York Giants on SI, where I can lay everything out a little bit neater than I can if I were to talk about it here on the podcast, but it is doable. All right. So the Giants, they can definitely fit that in. And look, here's the thing. If they take a quarterback this year, a young quarterback, even if it's not a day 1, if it's a day 2 or a day 3, they've now got a veteran player who can show the young kid the ropes. And before you say, well, look, these quarterbacks have been playing quarterback all their life. No, it's quite a different game when you get to the NFL level. It's now your job. It's now watching film is a little bit more detailed than maybe it was at the college level. You've got to, preparing your body and taking care of your body. A lot more goes into it than it did maybe at the college level. There's just so much more at the NFL level than there was at the college level. So having a mentor, a veteran mentor who has been there, done that, who has seen just about everything is invaluable. Whether your young quarterback is a first-round pick or a 7th-round pick, you want to have a veteran in there to kind of ease the transition. Because remember, the Giants are not one quarterback away from the Super Bowl. So even if they, were to draft a guy this year, and there's a possibility they might, again, I don't think it'll be in the first round if they get Stafford, but that guy, the young quarterback can learn from Stafford. Now, if they don't get a quarterback this year, guess what? They will have their quarterback in Stafford, assuming they get him, of course, on board for 2026, where, by the way, the Giants will have, there will be a deeper quarterback class as far as, maybe guys with first-round grades that there is right now, right? So there is a benefit to waiting, so it kind of all clicks together. It really does. And I've said before that, look, if the Giants get Stafford, and depending on how, the first 2 picks go, I could see them trading down, picking up some extra draft capital so that they are set up in 2026 if they have to move up to get their young franchise quarterback of the future. So it all kind of makes sense, I think, if you really sit and think about it. Now, I know a lot of you are just, running on emotion, and I get it. It's been frustrating, and everything this team seems to have done lately has been frustrating. But, in the short term, and you have to think short term, you have to think long term. I do think an acquisition of Matthew Stafford makes the most sense for the Giants. Now, if they don't get him, then it's on the plan B. And what's plan B? Probably the Giants look to trade up to get, Cam Ward. Assuming that that's the guy that they like. I've heard it's Cam Ward although you can't rule out them maybe liking Shador Sanders. But I think Cam Ward is the guy that, right now, and that can change obviously, but right now I think Cam Ward seems to be the favorite, if just by a hair. So that being said, coming up, we're going to talk about what might it cost the Giants to acquire Matthew Stafford. We're going to talk a little bit about money, but we're also going to talk about draft assets. So that's coming up right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and coming up on tomorrow's program, I'm going to have Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams. And I wonder what we're going to talk about. Probably what we're talking about today with Matthew Stafford. Seriously, I want to hear from Travis. I want to get an idea of, what might the Giants be getting in Stafford? What maybe he can, shed a little bit more light on into, where are negotiations? How did we get to this point? Does Stafford have anything left in the tank? Why have we gotten here? All that stuff. So that is coming up on tomorrow's program. Hope you will check that out. Travis Rogers, co-host of Locked On Rams. All right. So assuming the Giants and Rams agree to a trade, might it cost? Well, we all know the Rams are going to want the Giants' first round pick, which is number 3 overall. We probably all know that the Giants are not going to give the Rams that. And I think the Rams probably are going to have to come to the realization that they're not getting, regardless of where they trade Matthew Stafford to, they're not getting that team's number 1 pick. So what might move the needle? All right, I'll let your boy Q talk about the Raiders and what it might cost them, but I'll talk about the Giants and what I think could maybe move the needle for them. And I'm even going to give you a wacky scenario just based on something Joe Schoen said on Tuesday. But first, let's talk about draft picks, okay? So I think what the Rams might look to get are a combination of picks. Maybe the 2nd round pick, a 5th round pick, and a conditional pick in 2026. All right? Now, the conditional pick in 2026, maybe that's a 4th round pick that if Stafford plays a certain percentage of snaps or makes the playoffs or whatever the condition might be, maybe that now turns into a 3rd round pick. All right. Now, let's talk about this year, though. I mentioned a 2nd and a 5th. If I'm the Giants, though, I don't know that I want to give up a 2nd either. I definitely don't want to give up a 1st round pick. I don't think I want to give up a 2nd round pick either. So what I would consider if I'm the Giants is I would maybe say to the Rams, hey, listen, we will give you our 3rd round pick, which just so happens, by the way, to be, I think the first pick of that round. And it's kind of like a 2nd round pick. This, when you start getting to the end of the 2nd round, the beginning of the 3rd round, that's where the grades start to kind of blend together. You see it, maybe that moves the needle and gets the trade done. All right. So, I think ultimately the Giants will probably have to give up their 2nd round pick. I would not be shocked if that, ends up being part of the deal. But if I'm the Giants, I look to see if I can't, convince them to take a 3rd round pick. Now, I'm going to give you a wacky scenario, and you're all going to say I'm crazy for saying this because you're going to say to me, the Giants would be lucky to get a bag of donuts for this guy. But hear me out on this. The Rams are redoing their team because they have some salary cap concerns. One of the positions it looks like they will need is a right tackle. Do the Giants happen to have an extra right tackle that's not working out for them lying around on their roster that maybe they could move? Is it possible? Yeah, I'm talking about Evan Neal. Now, you're probably saying, no way. No, who's going to take Evan Neal? But again, hear me out on this, all right? Joe Schoen at the Combine was asked about the starting offensive line, and he mentioned we have 4 of the 5 guys set. Those 4 guys are tackles Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor, who will be your tackles next year, barring any injuries, John Michael Schmitz, who will be the center, and John Runyon Jr., who will be the left guard. Now, initially, I thought, okay, well, right guard, they're going to have Joshua Zudu, they're going to have Jake Kubas, and they're going to maybe have Evan Neal compete for that. Well, when I went back and I looked over the transcript that I generated off of Shane's media session, he didn't commit to the Giants converting Evan Neal to guard. As a matter of fact, he made a comment that kind of perked up my ears, or in this case, caught my eye. He said something to the effect of, the roster's going to look very different in a couple of weeks. All right. So I got to thinking, okay, look, the Giants are not going to pick up Evan Neal's fifth-year option. Evan Neal is not a bad run blocker. He just hasn't worked out here. He's a first-round draft pick. Maybe he goes to another team, gets a fresh start, and maybe they can make something of him. Why not trade him and see if you can't get something for him? Even if it's a day 3 pick, why not see if you can do that? In this case, we say to the Rams, listen, we don't want to give up our second-round pick, but we'll throw in Evan Neal because you guys need an offensive tackle. And maybe the Rams take Evan Neal and they do like what Philadelphia did with Mekhi Becton, formerly of the Jets. They convert him and they make him into a viable offensive lineman. Listen, stranger things have happened. Right now, do I think that's going to happen? Might not, because the Giants, this particular regime, has kind of been stubborn when it has come to their draft picks and admitting mistakes, and they have doubled down on mistakes, as I have pointed out on previous shows. But look, if you're not picking up Evan Neal's option year, why not send him out in a trade if you can get somebody to take him? In this case, again, the Rams needing a right tackle. Get somebody who might take him, get something in return for him. In this case, it would be your quarterback. I don't see anything wrong with that trade if it comes to fruition. And I know you're saying, again, Evan Neal stinks. He won't bring more than a bag of donuts. But you never know. You know, what did P.T. Barnum say? There's a sucker born every minute. So maybe the Rams, look at Evan Neal. They look at his tape and they say, okay, you know what? We can fix him. We can rebuild him, kind of like the Bionic Man, which I happened to see a rerun episode of last night. So that's why I had that in my head. But anyway, again, Mekhi Becton for the Jets was headed towards Bustville. The Eagles revitalized him. Would you rather see, the Giants let him go in free agency and now maybe he lands with the Eagles and becomes a viable option? I'd rather he go to another team if the Giants aren't going to keep him, that's not in the Giants division. So I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. It might not be as crazy as it sounds. And if it helps to maybe lessen the amount of draft picks you've got to give up to get Matthew Stafford, who's going to say no? All right. I can live with giving up the third pick and maybe, a fifth pick. I think the Giants might even get an extra third-round pick, depending on how the final comp picks are announced. But yeah, I can definitely, see something like that. And I would be fine with that personally. So we'll see how it plays out because, again, Matthew Stafford hasn't officially been made available for trade. The Rams are just letting his agent explore his value. And the Giants have competition that in the form of the Raiders and maybe, who knows, there might be other teams. So we'll see how that all plays out. Okay, coming up next, Joe Schoen mentioned there are about seven players, I should say, in this draft class that they really like. Who might those 7 be? I'm going to take a guess on the lucky 7 coming up right after this. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and lucky 7. Okay, the Giants general manager Joe Schoen told reporters at the Combine there are about 7 guys that they claim to like. All right, who are the 7? Well, Joe Schoen wasn't going to say, but we could take guesses. Let's take educated guesses as to who the 7 are, why they might like them, and where they might fit in if they were to fall to the Giants, whether they pick a 3 or whether they trade back a few spots because they think they can get one of these 7. All right. Up first, obviously, cornerback receiver Travis Hunter. The Giants need a playmaker in their defensive backfield. Hunter can bring that. The Giants are also going to probably need a wide receiver too if Darius Slayton leaves. It's possible that Hunter can get a select number of option or plays on offense and maybe do that as well. So you talk about outstanding value. If you're looking at Hunter as a two-way player, although not a full-time two-way player, that you can't get any better value than that, I think. So Hunter would be the first one. Abdul Carter would definitely be in that top 7, right? Abdul Carter, look, the Giants passed on Micah Parsons a few years ago. If Abdul Carter is sitting there when the Giants go on the clock, they'd be stupid not to take him. They need pass rushing help, especially if they're, while they're building up that defensive secondary. The pass rush last year was pretty effective for them, but it could be better. Abdul Carter can be that guy. And the other benefit of an Abdul Carter is if they decide, the Giants decide that is, to move on from Kayvon Thibodeau, which I don't think they're going to do right away. They're going to pick up Thibodeau's option year this year, which means they're going to have him this year and next year. Next year, it's going to be about $16 million plus. If they decide, he's just not working out, they've got Abdul Carter on a rookie deal. And it fits nicely with Brian Burns, whose contract numbers are going to go up and up and up. Okay, so Abdul Carter is definitely one of the 7. I'm going to say Cam Ward. I think this is just my opinion, but I get the impression that Cam Ward is maybe a slightly better prospect than Shedeur Sanders. And by the way, I do have Shedeur Sanders on this list, but I would put Ward a little bit ahead of Sanders as of right now. And the need, obviously, you've been talking about it all show long, quarterback. The Giants need a starting quarterback. Next guy, Mason Graham, defensive lineman. You heard me say it many, many times. The Giants have Dexter Lawrence on that defensive line, and then there's everybody else. And ever since they traded away Leonard Williams a few years ago, Dexter has had to go at it by himself. Now, when Dexter had Leonard Williams alongside of him, they had a nice little 1-2 punch going there. It is possible that, maybe the Giants like some of their young guys already on the roster a little bit better than maybe I do. And certainly you've got to remember, they've got an excellent defensive line coach in Andre Patterson, who is assisted by Brian Cox. And they have worked wonders with the young talent. But my gosh, if you could get a Mason Graham there, Dexter's going to eat, and he's going to eat well, because good luck trying to figure out, if you're the opposing offense, who are you going to double up? You're going to double up Graham, or you're going to double up Dexter. All right, next, Will Johnson, cornerback. Obvious reasons, right? We just talked about it with Travis Hunter. So, yeah, I could see Will Johnson being there. I don't know, in terms of the pecking order, I would probably put Travis Hunter ahead of Will Johnson, but Giants need cornerbacks. They definitely need cornerbacks. And I just don't think that, look, like pass rushers, you can never have too many cornerbacks. We've seen many, many instances where the injuries have hit the Giants and they just haven't had the depth. So I would be all in favor, although I still think, by the way, the Giants are going to look to get a veteran cornerback in here. But even if they do, I would not bat an eye if they double dipped at cornerback. If they took a cornerback on day 2 or day 1 or day 2, depending on, how the board falls. Okay. My final guy, and this one, I kind of went back and forth on this, but I was debating whether to go safety or tackle here. My 2 guys were Malake Starks of Georgia, Will Campbell of LSU, who's a tackle. I'm going to go with Starks because, again, the Giants' defensive secondary, to me, was a weakness. And they're going to probably lose Jason Pinnock. And even if even if Jason Pinnock looks to stay, I think they can upgrade that spot. So, I don't think Dane Belton can necessarily be an every down starter. He's a good, role player. And fills a certain, role on the team on the defense, but I would definitely look to get another safety in here. I know safety is not highly prioritized in Shane Bowman's defense, but the depth scares me. Not just, at safety, but also at cornerback, like I said before. So that would be my seventh guy on the lucky seven. Now, I've also considered a couple of others. I mentioned Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU. I even considered, and I'm going to botch this name, I'm sure, Ted Taroya McMillan, the receiver from Arizona, who, look, if the Giants lose Darius Slayton, they're going to need a wide receiver too. All right. You don't want to get into a situation where it's Malik Neighbors and everybody else. Jalen Hyatt has not really come on yet for whatever the reason. I don't know if, this coming year is going to be the year for him. But if they lose Slayton, what do they do at receiver 2? Now, you might say, well, if they draft, Travis Hunter, that problem is solved. Not necessarily. Not if they look at Hunter as a full-time cornerback who maybe occasionally will get a play or two here. You're going to want a good wide receiver too. And Joe Schoen, I don't think wants to go out in the free agency market and have to pay an arm and a leg to get a wide receiver too. So I could see McMillan maybe making some sense there as a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily go that route, because I believe the Giants need to build east side out as opposed from the outside in, which is what they primarily have been doing with this regime. But, look, like I said, if there's 7 guys available that they like, these are just some of the names that, I think you have to consider for the reasons that I have stated. So that's my list. Let me know if I missed anybody or what you think. Maybe you have another one or another list that you want to present. So if you're watching on YouTube, just drop a comment below and let me know what your list looks like. Or if you're listening on our audio platforms, you can always send me an email. The contact information is in the show notes. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for spending part of your day with us here. We appreciate your time, and we will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.